Hey everyone, today we're diving into the history of an ancient and powerful group, the Rouran Khaganate. Now, the Rouran weren't just any tribe. They were a strong confederation founded by people who were likely of proto-Mongolic origins, a heritage shared with the Donghu peoples. These rulers used the title of Khagan, an influential rank borrowed from their predecessors, the Xianbei, symbolizing their authority over vast territories. At its peak, their empire stretched across present-day Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, parts of Manchuria, eastern Siberia, and even extended into parts of Xinjiang and Kazakhstan. The Rouran Khaganate wasn't just big in terms of land. They controlled a sophisticated trade network and held power over several other groups. One of their vassals was the Hephthalites, a powerful kingdom in its own right, with the two royal families intermarrying to strengthen their alliance. But as the saying goes, every empire eventually meets its match, and for the Rouran, that challenge came in the form of a Turkic uprising. This rebellion led to the end of the Rouran Khaganate and marked the beginning of the Turks' prominent role in history. Some Rouran people scattered after their fall. Some may have joined groups that would later be called the Tatars, while others possibly moved westward, becoming the Avars, who eventually settled in what is now Hungary. The Gok Turks, the new power on the bloc, were determined to hunt these remnants down, even pressuring the Byzantine Empire to reject them. A recent DNA study has even confirmed that the elite among the Avars likely had roots in the Mongolian plains, linking them back to their Rouran ancestors. However, there's still some debate about these connections, with other theories suggesting that the Avars' origins might involve different steppe peoples, like the Avar. The Rouran society itself was structured around what some historians describe as nomadic feudalism. They relied on exploiting and raiding neighboring agricultural societies to secure resources. Their rule was fiercely militaristic, aimed at gaining dominance over nearby trade routes and keeping a grip on wealthy oases like Gaochang. Historians have often depicted the Rouran as a band of steppe robbers, employing a strategy of raiding and extortion against northern China. So, what about their name? The term Rouran has deep historical layers. In classical Chinese, Rouran directly represents the confederation's name, while alternative names like Ronruan and Ruru popped up in various records. Some of these terms were less flattering, like the one that translates roughly to wriggling worm, a jab from their Tuoba Xianbei rivals. Scholars suggest this name might even be rooted in a term meaning companion or ally, referencing the early comrades who stood by the Rouran leaders in their formative days. As for their origins, ancient records trace the Rouran back to the Donghu people, who were likely the forebears of the Mongolic-speaking Xianbei. Some Chinese historians believe that the Rouran were also connected to the earlier Xiongnu, a powerful nomadic confederation, though this link remains speculative. Genetic tests seem to support a strong Donghu Xianbei influence, giving us a glimpse into the lineage that contributed to the formation of this unique society. And as we moving forward in the story of the Rouran Khaganate, we see how Mùgǔluò, the founder, took the scattered Rouran clans and united them under his leadership. Xianbei himself was a descendant of Mùgǔluò, a former Xianbei slave. The Rouran had a long history with the Xianbei, often supplying wives and concubines to them, which bound their fates in complex ways. However, once the Xianbei migrated south into Chinese territories around the end of the 3rd century, the Rouran began stepping up as fierce warriors in their own right. By 402 AD, Xianbei managed to bring the Rouran chieftains together, forming a united force, and set his sights on expansion. Northern Wei quickly became their primary rival. In a swift response, Wei launched an offensive to push the Rouran out of the Ordos region. But Xianbei, undeterred, turned his forces westward, eventually subjugating neighboring groups, including the TL, and extending Rouran influence along the Silk Roads. They even managed to dominate the Hephthalites, who remained their subjects until the early 5th century. The Hephthalites, pressured by the Rouran, moved southeastward and displaced the Eurasian Bactria, forcing them even further south. Despite tensions, the Hephthalites borrowed heavily from the Rouran, even adopting the title Khan for their rulers, a title first coined by the Rouran. Initially, Northern Wei viewed the Rouran as mere vassals. By 506, however, with the Rouran's growing power, their status evolved, and Wei acknowledged them as an equal partner. This was far from a stable peace though. Conflicts were frequent. In 424, the Rouran invaded Northern Wei but were ultimately repelled. In 429, Wei retaliated with a significant offensive, inflicting heavy casualties on the Rouran. In response to their nomadic hit-and-run tactics, Emperor Dao of Northern Wei famously described the Rouran as wolves who raided during winter and grazed on their northern pastures in summer. His strategy was clear: to confront them in summer, striking when their horses were least fit for combat, thus weakening them by cutting off their grazing lands and water supplies. In 434, a marriage alliance was forged between the Rouran and Northern Wei, but this didn't end their skirmishes. Wei launched further attacks in 443, 449, 456, and 458, keeping the Rouran under relentless pressure. In 460, the Rouran subdued the Ashina tribe near Turpan and moved them to the Altai Mountains. They also replaced the ruling family in Gaochang with a loyal ally, Khan Bojo. Tensions with Wei persisted, but the Rouran also had internal struggles. A significant event occurred in 518 when Nagai, a prominent Rouran figure, married a sorceress named Devan and named her Kagachun for her contributions. This ceremony highlighted the influence of various advisors and officials within the Rouran hierarchy. Throughout this period, the Rouran Khaganate engaged in multiple diplomatic marriages known in China as Hekan, with both Northern Wei and its successor states, Eastern and Western Wei. These alliances weren't just limited to Wei. Other neighboring states sought to secure their support through royal intermarriages, making the Rouran an influential player in regional politics. Archaeological findings from the tomb of Princess Lin, uncovered in the 1970s in Hebei, reveal the cultural richness of the Rouran legacy. The tomb featured Byzantine coins, exquisite murals, and figurines that showcased the princess's roots, including one of a shaman in a dance posture, holding a saw-like instrument, a piece that reflects her nomadic heritage. By 540, the Rouran attacked Western Wei, reportedly mobilizing a force of 1 million warriors, driven by the dissatisfaction of a Rouran princess with her position in the imperial household. This vast mobilization speaks to the ongoing influence of the Rouran and their strong presence on the steppe, and some surviving fragments of their people are said to have eventually transformed into what we now know as the Tatars. Historical records suggest that a faction of Rouran remnants retreated northwest, near the greater Khingan mountain range, renaming themselves Datan or Tantan, reportedly after Tantan, a Rouran Khagan. Over time, these groups assimilated into the Shui tribal confederation, eventually emerging as a group known in Chinese chronicles as the Great De Shui. There's some scholarly debate on the origins of the Tatars, with theories suggesting they may have had connections to these Rouran remnants. But the story of the Rouran doesn't end there. Another significant theory proposes that the remnants of the Rouran migrated far westward and laid the foundations of the Avars. Although this theory is still contested among scholars, modern genetic research has added weight to it. Recent genetic studies suggest the Avars may indeed have carried a distinct eastern profile, which would tie them back to the Rouran's territory on the Mongolian steppes. By the mid-6th century, following the collapse of the Rouran Empire in 552, Eastern Roman diplomats encountered a new group on the shores of the Caspian Sea, claiming to be the Avars and boasting ties to a once powerful people from the Far East. They introduced themselves as descendants of the Rouran, and there was likely some truth to it. However, the Avars were not a large migratory group, but more likely a faction who had escaped annihilation by moving westward under the unrelenting pressure from the Gokturks. The Gokturks, who had overthrown the Rouran, declared the Avars enemies for allegedly misusing the title Khagan and even accused them of falsely appropriating the name Avars. This animosity fueled a relentless pursuit by the Gokturks, who saw the Avars as pretenders and remnants of an empire they had already toppled. For the Avars, claiming Rouran heritage may have been a means of holding on to their imperial past, much like the Karakitans who, centuries later, would attempt to retain their identity after being displaced from northern China, while they would eventually incorporate a variety of other peoples, including Slavs and Goths. The Avars are thought to have brought their East Asian roots with them into Europe, where they left a distinctive genetic footprint that hints at their origins far to the east.